Hello and welcome to the YYC Soccer Podcast. My name is Jason Komet and my co-host is Scott Strasser. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Jason. How are you tonight?
Everything's going pretty well. It's a cool evening. Fall is here, but soccer, we're still have lots of soccer action for a little while yet before the snow blows.
Yeah, I think we're 3 or 4 weeks into the university season. I know we'll be chatting a little bit about that later on, and lots of Canadian Premier League content going on, news breaking. Found out about the regular season trophy was unveiled today, or the new shield was unveiled today. So yeah, lots of soccer related content and news going on, and I'm happy to dive into it today.
So if you're our new listener, what is the YYC Soccer Podcast all about, Scott?
We focus on soccer in Calgary at the amateur, collegiate, and professional levels. We talk about the teams and the players from the city's soccer community, from the grassroots and amateur leagues up to the university and professional level.
And this week we're going to talk about actually a few of the things that we usually talk about. I guess we're going to talk about Cavalry and how they did last weekend and update what's happening this week and U21 minutes. We're also going to do an interview this week with Sebastian Dzikowski, and he is a striker for UBC, and he's from Calgary, and he's currently leading Canada West, actually all of U Sports in the scoring race. And we'll do a couple U Sport and ACAC updates.
Yeah, so another busy episode for us, and we've been talking a lot about Cavalry this season on the podcast lately, and but we got to keep doing it because they keep playing, and the season is inching towards the playoffs. And Cavalry are obviously at the top of the heap at the moment. They've already clinched a playoff spot, and they're just 4 points away from clinching the regular season title. So they're having a great couple of months.
Yeah, it's real easy to talk about them right now because it's lots of good stuff to talk about for sure. And let's go back to last week and we'll talk a little bit about the match at Spruce Meadows where they had Vancouver FC as their opponent, and they pulled out the victory again. It was 2-1.
Yeah, this match was hardly what you'd call a classic, but very much a professional win by Cavalry. Professional is actually the term that Meyer Bevan used in the press conference to describe Cavalry's performance, which I agree with. I was predicting a 3-0 win, and midway through the second half, it was 2-0, and it seemed like another Cavalry goal was coming, and I felt I was going to be right on with my prediction. But Vancouver made a game of it quite late, thanks to a very well-hit strike from Renan Garcia shortly before stoppage time. That made it 2-1, and Cavalry did have to buckle down the last 3 or 4 minutes of stoppage time. But they were able to hold on. Their defense has been really strong lately, and this was another case of that. But yeah, their goals, one in each half. The first half, Meyer Bevan slotted home a penalty kick after Ali Musi had been sandwiched in the box. And then in the second half, it was an own goal caused by a cross whipped in by Ben Fisk on a neat counterattack. Vancouver was a little bit unlucky, but I did feel like their defender could have done a bit better at getting his foot on it. But no, it was a 2-0 lead, and then late goal from Renan Garcia really made a game of it, but overall Cavalry was deserved winner.
Yeah, I thought that strike by Vancouver near the end there, it was a really well hit ball. But yeah, I think one thing, we don't want to necessarily spend too much time analyzing Vancouver, but it seems like consistently defensive lapses have sort of been their Achilles heel, and that penalty that Bevan converted on, like, that was just a really brutal tackle by the Vancouver player. And then that own goal. Yeah. So anyway, at the end of the day, from the Cavalry perspective, they got the goals and they got the points. So hard to argue with that.
Absolutely. And you're right about Vancouver. Like, they always seem to show glimpses of quality, and that goal at the end was an example of that. But you're right. It's defensive lapses have been their downfall. They have 23 goals for this season and 46 goals against, which is the worst goals against record in the league, and minus 23 goal differential. That's by far the worst goal differential in the CPL. They aren't in last place anymore, though. Cavalry FC is in last, but Vancouver FC, they're an expansion club. They've had some growing pains that they've gone through this season. I did ask both I guess he was filling in as coach, Mark Village, and the player who spoke to the media after the game. I can't remember off the top of my head who it was, but I was curious what they felt, if they felt Vancouver had made some strides this season, and they said they had, but they said that they were really, they were basically starting from scratch as a club and as an organization. New stadium, new coach who hadn't coached in the league before, a lot of players who hadn't played in the league before. They were really, behind the eight ball from day one, which I think is fair to say.
Yeah, for sure. And for the Cavs, their next match is this upcoming Saturday afternoon, and it's in Toronto. They're facing York United. I guess right now, probably the most relevant bit of information that when prepping for this was, okay, how can the Cavs possibly clinch first place this weekend? And it is possible. What they would have to do is they have to win. They have to beat York, and then Forge plays Pacific. So if Forge wins that match, or if it's a tie match, then the Cavs would clinch first place. But if Pacific wins, no matter what Calgary does, they can't clinch. So possible, and not even a long shot, but it's far from a sure thing this weekend. But there's still 2 more matches after this.
Yeah, so there are 3 matches to go. York on the road, and then their 2 last games, which are against Valor and Pacific, will be at home. I do think Cavalry is going to clinch this, but I don't think it'll be this weekend. I feel like it'll be the weekend after, even though I do think they're going to win against York. York are coming off a really poor performance, a 4-1 loss to Pacific. I believe it drew quite a bit of criticism from their head coach, Martin Nash. So I am curious to see what version of York we will see on Saturday, if they'll come in, with their tail between their legs, or if they'll come in ready to make amends for that defeat last week.
Okay, let's get on to the next topic we usually talk about at this time, and that's U21 minutes. So after 25 matches, the Cavs have 1,763 minutes. So they are 237 minutes short, which is an average over the next 3 games of 79 minutes a match.
Which is about the amount that they've been for the last number of games in terms of how many minutes they need. So we continue to talk about this every episode, but Cavalry continues to kind of put it off. They do play Garrett Smith Doyle and Mile Henry every game, it seems, and they do get a decent amount of playing time, but they tend to get subbed in or out. I did ask Tommy Wheeldon Jr. during the press conference if Cavalry does win the regular season title with a game or 2 to spare, are we going to see, 18-year-old goalkeeper Joseph Holiday, who hasn't gotten to play yet this season? He basically said maybe. Actually, the word he used was maybe. So we'll see if that happens.
Yeah, I think for this week, it's going to be status quo. We're probably going to see Smith Doyle and Henry play probably the usual amount of minutes, which if they've both been playing right around the hour mark. So if you said it's 240 minutes they have left, and they knock off maybe 120 minutes today, then they're going to have 120 minutes to go with 2 matches left. And so it's still one of these things that it's going to happen, and exactly when it's going to happen and, how long this gets drawn out. But I think that, like I said, we'll see status quo, and who knows if they do end up clinching. Yeah, I think the next game you're just going to see lots and lots of U21 minutes, so that going into the final match, they're done and they don't have to think about it. So
against Pacific, and they could also field Michael Harms. He got a little bit of playing time against Vancouver, subbed in the 84th minute, I think it was. So he's another option. Again, he might get anywhere from 5 to 10 to 20 minutes this week. We'll see. But no, you're right. I think they're going to hit that 2,000 minute threshold either in the second last game of the season or in the last game of the season. But it shouldn't really be a problem for them unless, 2 or 3 of those U21 players get injured.
Somebody gets injured and somebody gets a red card, then all of a sudden you have almost no choice but to play Holiday. But anyway, that's not terribly likely to happen, I guess, for all those things to happen. But okay, let's move on to our interview. For this week, we have UBC forward Sebastian Dzikowski his background is he is from Calgary, and he's playing in his third year with UBC. He has scored 12 goals and so far, which is way higher than basically anybody else in U Sports. I believe on the national goal leading list, the next player is a player from Ontario that has 8 goals. And in Canada West, the second place player has 4 goals. So he's way ahead of that. And then his goal scoring run has really been extended from the summertime because he played for Cowleys in AMSL this past year, and he won the Golden Boot in the AMSL. So he even alludes to that a little bit in the interview about how scoring a lot for Cowleys has probably helped him get going this season. So yeah, it was a nice little chat.
I haven't listened to the interview yet, and I wasn't able to join you for it. It seems like he's a goal-scoring machine, though. And was that 12 goals in 8 games so far? Has he played all?
I believe that's right. In fact, when I looked at the stats, I believe the only game he never scored in was the last game. And that was the game that they tied, I think, or something.
Okay.
Against. So yeah, so he's basically scored in every game they've played, at least, 12 goals, 8 games. You can do the math, more than a goal a game.
And I think you were going to ask him about this in the interview, so I imagine you guys talked about it, but he's not the only Calgarian on UBC this year, right?
Yeah, we didn't really talk too much about that, but there's a couple other Calgarians on the team, and I apologize in advance to the Kaiser family, but one of the Kaiser brothers, there's Marcus and Daniel, and I believe they both played last year, but this year it's only one of them. And the other Kaiser brother, I think he play for Foothills this year, I believe.
In
Could
League
be wrong.
One or in yeah.
And anyway, only one of the Kaiser brothers are with UBC this year, and I believe there is one other Calgarian on the team, but I can't remember who it is. But Sebastian's not the only Calgarian. There's a couple others.
Which is neat to see, because not that long ago it was almost unheard of for Calgarian players to crack the roster at UBC. UBC has traditionally drawn a lot of their players from, I think, like the Vancouver Whitecaps residency program. So they have a lot of alumni from that program, and they tend to be a pretty BC heavy squad, and really tough for a Calgarian to get recruited to that program, which, as we know, is the powerhouse of Canada West. So very cool to see a Calgarian succeed with them to the extent that Sebastian Dzikowski is this year.
For sure. So let's run that interview now. I'd like to welcome Sebastian Dzikowski to the podcast today. Sebastian is currently with UBC Thunderbirds and is currently leading Canada West in goal scoring. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Congratulations on leading the league in scoring so far this year. What's been really the key to your success that you've really been able to, I think 12 goals, isn't it? Something like that.
Yeah, 12 goals as of this moment right now. It's a good question. I think that, the reality is we have a very talented team, and I'm lucky enough to, have guys around me that are looking for me in the box. And like, if you look at our statistics, I'm obviously doing quite well in terms of goals and points and whatnot, but there's a few other guys that are, not far behind. Luke Norman in particular, who likes to play in the 10. He's gotten multiple assists through me. Connor Mrazek's putting up great numbers. Like, there's a bunch of guys, and so like obviously, I'm getting in good positions, and I pride myself on being a kind of a fox in the box, but it's my teammates that are finding me. And I think there's a lot of situations where we're getting a lot of assists and combinations and whatnot. So it's really kind of due to them.
I know you mentioned about your teammates, but do you think there's been any changes in your approach to the game that's maybe made any changes for you that's resulted in all the goals this year?
I think that there's definitely a few things. I think overall, I'm just playing with a bit more confidence. I was playing in Calgary back home for the summer, playing with Callies, like just doing AMSL, like Alberta Major League Soccer, and it was good to kind of get myself going, get my kind of shooting boots on. Had a pretty good season there where I could kind of rack up goals, and then I just kind of took that confidence into our preseason and then now into our regular season. So I think that's been a big change from years past, because obviously in years past with UBC there's been a lot of competition with the likes of like Victory, Shumbusho, or like Tristan Gohi, and so on and so forth. We always have a multitude of great attacking options. So I think that's been a big one. Another thing is just kind of what I touched on earlier, like my movement and positioning in the box has been a big focus of mine. I've been kind of watching a lot of film and analyzing players like, the Haalands, the Lewandowskis, the Benzemas of the world, and just kind of tracking their movement and their little fake runs in the boxes and whatnot, and trying to kind of mimic those, and it's paid off.
Actually, you touched on something there that was going to be one of my questions in a couple questions, but I'm going to talk about it right now, about your experience with the Cowleys. I noticed that this year you did play for them, and I believe you got the Golden Boot in AMSL. I think it was 11 goals or something like that.
Yes.
How did you end up with the Cowleys? Like, what was the process?
Well, so I was lucky enough to play with them in 2021. As we were everyone was getting out of COVID, there was that, like a summer season that started off where we weren't traveling like up to Edmonton or anything much. I think it was still like local in Calgary, but I played with them 2 years ago, and like I had known a few of the guys through some youth soccer, through some individual training and whatnot, as some of them were like personal trainers, so on and so forth. And I just liked the group. And then in 2022, I stayed back in Vancouver because I was on co-op for school, and I was playing with League One BC with our Varsity FC at the time. And so then when I came back to Calgary in 2023, I just reached out to the Cowleys again because I knew that a bunch of them were still on that team. I knew that it was a good level. They brought in some new faces, some strong players, and I figured it would be a good group to keep myself around to stay competitive and stay fit. So that was kind of the thought process.
When you come to play in AMSL this year, how would you say compare it to League One BC last year? Like, what are the differences between the two?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I'd say there's a little like you get older guys in AMSL. Like it's like I find League One BC is probably similar to League One Alberta. It's a lot of young talent, new faces, kind of anywhere between that like 18 to 24-year-old range. While playing for AMSL, there's guys that are getting around 30, 35, but they're still great. So I'd say like it might be. I'd argue that AMSL might even be more physical. I'd compare it more to like a VMSL Premier kind of level in terms of the physicality. But there's no denying that League One BC was filled with university players, the likes of UVic and Trinity Western and UFE, and even guys from the prairies like MRU and whatnot coming in and playing for different teams. I'd say the level might be a little bit higher at League One BC, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's like a drastic difference, because you also have the likes of like, UFC has a team in the AMSL. There's guys that play for SAIT that play in the AMSL. U of A has a team. So I think overall there's definitely a lot of similarities too.
Growing up in Calgary, what was your background? Like, what clubs did you play for growing up as a youth?
Yeah, that's actually a funny question because I kind of bounced around a little bit. So in terms of like, I'd say competitive club, because obviously I did like the U6 for Edgemont, like just a community thing to start off with. But I think it was around U10, U12, I went to Calgary West for about a year or two, and then our whole team transferred over to Southwest United, in which I played there for, I believe, like 3-4 years, I want to say. Then I moved to Villains, because before I was playing with the 2000s, then I went and joined the Villains 01 team, which I stayed for, I think, also kind of 3-4 years. And then I finished off kind of like my U16 to pretty much up until I graduated. I stayed with Foothills and finished off there. Getting
recruited to UBC, how did you end up there? Because, it's not the really super obvious location for Calgarians. I know you're not the only Calgarian on the roster, but what was the process of getting recruited and making the decision to go to UBC?
There was a few aspects to it for me. Obviously, I was aware of the prestige that kind of the UBC men's soccer team had in the the world of U Sports, with their kind of dominance over their entire existence, with like the most banners and whatnot. So like that was definitely of interest to me. I wanted to play for a team that was competitive every single year. And another big one was school for me. Like I'm an engineering student, and so for me, I knew that UBC was one of the like best engineering programs in the country. So looking at those two aspects, it kind of all directions pointed towards UBC. And then, yeah, I kind of like got in contact with Mike, like our coach, in grade 11, and just went out there a couple of times, did some ID camps, trained with the team a little bit, got some more exposure. And then, to be fair, Footos had also set up like a few, I don't know how to, like kind of like exposure games, like exhibitions where they brought in some coaches, like U of A was there and Lethbridge and UBC flew out, and like just different coaches from kind of Canada West had flown in specifically for like to look at guys. And so obviously I took part in those games and had more conversations with coaches, specifically Mike. And yeah, as kind of things progressed, we had a couple trips out there with Footos as well to UBC, just continue to kind of develop that relationship. And then when kind of my grade 12 year came around, I knew that I was thinking about going there. I made my intentions kind of clear to Mike and my plan for school and for soccer, and we were both on the same page, and one thing led to another, and I signed with UBC.
Looking ahead for this year, what are your goals and aspirations for the rest of this season?
I mean, I think like at the end of the day, we had a very disappointing loss last year, as I'm sure you might know, in that national final. So I think that's kind of left a bitter taste in our mouths. So I think that it's a kind of a collective goal, but it's obviously an individual goal for myself as well to get back to that game and to end up on the right side of it this year. So I think that's been kind of lighting a fire in all of us, myself included, which is why we're doing quite well to start the season, and I think we plan to do well throughout the season. So I'd say that's a larger kind of collective goal. But I just want to continue to help my team in any way I can, and as a striker, my responsibility is either scoring goals or setting goals up and getting involved in the play. So if I can kind of continue to do that, then I will. I don't have any like set benchmarks. I don't think there's any need to kind of put extra pressure on myself to reach a certain goal or whatnot. I think the goals will come if I get in the right places, and my teammates will find me. So I'm going to kind of continue to do what I do, and as long as we're winning games, that's all I really care about.
Personally, like, what's your plan going forward? Like right now, you're in your third year of eligibility, and I think when you're scoring as many goals as you are, I think that's bound to get some attention, potentially professionally. What are your thoughts? Are you thinking at some point you want to go down that road, or I know it's a little ahead of things, but still, where are you at?
No, I've definitely taken some thought into it even before the season. I think that I'm not ruling anything out whatsoever. I'm trying to keep as much of an open mind as possible and see where things go with professional soccer. I mean, at the end of the day, I think anyone playing at this kind of level has probably dreamt of playing professional soccer at one point or another in their life. I know for me, it's always been, a goal. If CPL teams are looking or reaching out, then I'd be happy to, listen to them and take their calls and whatnot. And maybe I'll look towards, going to Europe or something. I do have that Polish background, as you can tell by my last name. So there's, opportunity with the Polish passport to maybe try something in there, but like nothing concrete as of right now, as I think it is still a little bit, too soon to say, but it's definitely on the table. I definitely am considering it. Like in terms of like schooling, I don't really know. I could be graduating this year. I might be graduating next year. Maybe I'll go back and play some more at UBC. That's all stuff that I'm going to kind of have to work out.
Thanks very much. It's Sebastian Dzikowski.
Yeah, there you go.
So thanks, Sebastian, for taking the time to do the interview today, and we wish you all the best for the rest of this season and beyond.
Of course. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks to Sebastian Dzikowski for sitting down with us for a few minutes and chatting about the season. As we've been doing, we'll continue on doing this. We'll run through U Sports and talk about what happened this past weekend. And let's start off with talking about the men's side. Mount Royal, on the men's side, they had 2 wins. They had a victory against Victoria and also over University of Fraser Valley, which I think they actually won 5-0 on that one. They're now ranked 6th nationally. They were 7th last week. And yeah, they're looking pretty good. And if you want to throw it back to a Cavs perspective, Nick Moroniak, who was with the Cavs earlier this year, and I think he played in one match, part of a few minutes in one match, and then he think he broke his collarbone. He had a significant injury. Anyway, he's been playing regularly for Mount Royal, and he scored in the one match against Victoria. So I think he's got a couple goals this season. So it sounds like he's slipped right in there and has been contributing for the Cougars, which is a really strong team. And from the Dino standpoint, for the men, they had a win and a tie. They tied Trinity Western and they beat UNBC, and that was their first win of the season.
Yeah. So MRU has been having a really good season. Obviously, 2 clean sheets this past weekend. And then on the Dino side, it's interesting because they were the Canada West runner-up last year, but they've had a tough time getting going so far. They're rocking a 1-3-2 record at the moment, and they're in 5th place in the Prairies Conference, which only has 6 teams. So it hasn't been really their year. But Mount Royal are right up there, challenging for first place. But yeah, Mount Royal and University of Alberta are the 2 top teams in Canada West at the moment. Dinos have fallen off a bit from last year, which I think makes sense considering they did graduate quite a few of their stronger players, right? Eric Hobbs, for instance, isn't with that team anymore, and neither is Garrett Smith-Doyle.
Okay, let's talk about on the women's side. And Dinos women had 2 ties. They tied Trinity Western 3-3, where previous podcast guest Rachel Barlow scored all 3 goals for the Dinos. And then they also tied Fraser Valley 0-0. Then moving on to Mount Royal, the women's, they had a win against the University of Alberta. And then they played MacEwan, and they were losing to MacEwan 2-0. And then they called the match due to air quality. So I don't exactly know what the plan is for finishing that up. As it stands in the standings right now, that game doesn't count as anything if they haven't included it in there.
Okay. But a great weekend for Rachel Barlow getting that hat trick in that one game. So the Dinos when was their last win? Because I feel like they got off to a really hot start, but they're 4-1-2 at the moment. And yeah, it looks like they lost to MacEwan on the 10th, and then they tied Trinity Western and University of Fraser Valley. So they're 3 games without a win after starting the season with 4 wins on the bounce. So a little bit of a dip in form for the Dinos, but they'll be hoping to get back to winning ways against UBC Okanagan on the road this Friday, probably the day this episode comes out.
Let's move over to the colleges and ACAC and start on the women's side. And State women keep rolling on. They got 2 wins. They won 8-1 against Olds and 4-1 against Red Deer. They're 4-0, ranked 14th nationally, which is the same as last week. And Ambrose women, they had a couple losses, 4-0 and 7-0. So they continue on at winless. And on the men's side, the State men also got a couple victories, and big ones at that. They beat Olds 8-0 and they beat Red Deer 7-1. So their record is 3-0, and they're ranked 2nd nationally, up from 3rd. The last thing to mention here on this side for the men's side is Ambrose men. They won 2-0 against Medicine Hat, and I believe that this is their 5th year of existence, and that is their 2nd victory ever. Yeah, that's positive progress, I guess.
Yeah, that's quite the story, and that's great news for Ambrose. And it was, they won 2-0. It's not like they won 1-0, but State, like, they just are steamrolling teams. I don't even know what the women's goal differential must be right now, considering they had those 2 huge wins the opening weekend. 8-1 win over Olds and 4-1 win over Red Deer, which was the team that won the GCAC title last year, if I recall correctly. Great weekend for them, and equally strong weekend on the men's side. And yeah, that's quite the recognition to be ranked 2nd in Canada.
Yeah, and I think the one thing I'm wondering about right now on the women's side is I think Lethbridge College is still ranked above them. So the big question right now is, when do those 2 face off? And to tell you the truth, I didn't look in advance, but I think it's coming up pretty soon. In fact, it could even be within the next weekend or 2. So that should be really interesting if those 2 teams play each other, because I think those would be 2 nationally ranked teams in Alberta that will face each other in regular season play.
Yeah, they're in the same division, of course. I'm going to look that up right now, actually.
Oh, I see it. September 30th. So next weekend.
So next weekend will be the heavyweight South Division ACAC battle between SAIT and Lethbridge College.
Okay, well, I think we've kind of hit most of the points that we usually hit. We kind of have fallen into a familiar format here over the last few weeks, but I think that we did kind of cover off the main things we wanted to address for this week. Is there anything else, Scott, that you wanted to throw out there right now, or?
No, I don't think so. I think it's great to keep talking about college and university soccer as well as Cavalry. Maybe next week we'll switch it up a little bit, or maybe the order that we talk about these respective teams. But overall, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and I'm happy to keep talking about these levels of soccer.
Yeah, definitely. And I've been trying to talk to some people about being guests on the podcast, and maybe we'll continue on with having someone from post-secondary or the Cavs, but maybe we'll be able to go in a different direction and get someone different. Tune in next week to find out.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to the YYC Soccer Podcast. You can subscribe to the podcast by using all the usual podcasting platforms. Head over to our website at yycsoccer.com for more information about how to subscribe or to leave a question or comment. You can also follow us on Twitter at YYC Soccer 403. Thanks for listening.